All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.
Good morning, and welcome to All Rights Reserved, where we talk about things that impact our community. I'm Yolanda Taylor, the voice behind this mic, and your host, the community lawyer. Today, we're talking about something that is changing almost every aspect of our lives. And what am I talking about? I am talking about artificial intelligence, y'all. Some people believe that AI will unlock these incredible opportunities. Others worry about job security or displacement. Some people are worried about surveillance, misinformation, maybe environmental impacts, and whether these technologies are being developed fairly. But what does AI mean for workers, for students, for businesses, for social movements, for communities already dealing with inequity? Some of that I will talk about, some of that my exciting guests will talk about. But will AI create new opportunities or deepen existing divides, is what people are wondering, right? But today we are going to move beyond the hype, the rumors, the misinformation, and the headlines to have a real conversation about where AI is headed, who benefits, who bears the cost, and how all of us can prepare for a future that is arriving faster than many people realize. So, to help us unpack these questions, I'm joined by my special guest, Ashley Gatewood. Yeah, Ashley, thank you for being
Yeah,
here today.
thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Oh, you're definitely welcome. Ashley Gatewood is a leadership and transformation strategist who sits at the intersection of people, innovation, organization change, and emerging technology. She helps organizations navigate disruption, prepare for the future of work, and develop leaders who can thrive rapidly in changing environments. Today, she'll help us understand where artificial intelligence is headed, what it means maybe for careers and communities, and how we can prepare a future that's already beginning to reshape the way we live and work. Ashley, again, welcome to All Rights Reserved.
Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
so let's get into some questions that will just tell us a little bit more about you, Ashley. So, can
Okay.
you share a bit about your journey, how you end up working at the intersection of leadership, transformation, and technology?
Absolutely. So, what I would tell you is, I did not start this journey thinking I was going to end up in tech, because there's so many people who wake up and are like, I love tech. I wanted to be in computer science. I wanted to be an engineer. I was none of that. And I think that's okay because it takes all kinds. So,
Yeah.
in college, I ended up majoring in marketing because I loved psychology. I loved business. I loved figuring out how do we influence behavior. But I had a really great mentor tell me, I think it's important for you to pick up a hard skill and really learn how to at least understand technology and what's coming, understand the data, understand coding. I don't enjoy coding personally, but I know enough to be dangerous. So all of that to say, I picked up that second major of operations and information management, and that helped land me a job in consulting. So I spent the majority of my career actually in federal government consulting, and then consulting for public and private companies, and helping them learn to adopt new technologies to help their businesses. So that then eventually took me into working for specific companies like SAS Institute, Google, in helping them think about their own internal technologies and what they needed to operate. So that is probably the short version of how I ended up in tech. It was not intentional, but it really was born of that love of the intersection between people and technology, because I'm a firm believer that no matter how good our technology is, at the end of the day, the people is what matters the most in this equation. So my job is to help the people deal with the technology and learn how to use it, and or to manage through their emotions, their fears, anything that's coming up for them in order to use it the most effectively.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Sounds like an exciting job. Can we give like snaps to Black
It
woman, Black
is.
girl magic and technology? I mean, really, I mean, that's exciting. And, it's inspiring to me because I have daughters who have already told me that my job is boring. They don't want to be a lawyer. But one wants to do engineering, one wants to do science, and then there's some technology there too, as far as like, the alpha generation. I mean, they're
Yes.
so intuitive when it comes to technology. But then, I would say I'm a Gen X. I approach technology different because what I have to tell my kids is that you know, I approach technology differently from you, right? Like how you want to
Absolutely.
arrange your icons on your iPhone may not be the way I want to arrange my icons on my
Yeah.
iPhone. Just something simple like that. But how has your understanding of technology changed? I'm just talking about my understanding, but how has your understanding of technology changed throughout your career?
Yeah. I mean, I can remember when the iPhone came out. So let's just start with that. That was pre-career for me, but I think it's an important moment in realizing, hey, everything's about to change. And
Yes.
my perspective at that time was as a user of a new technology, but it
Mm-hmm.
also gave me this spark of, okay, you can change the game. What if you understand technology to be doesn't mean that's what it has to be in the future. So all of that to say, part of my evolution and perspective on tech has been when I first started thinking about it or using it, it was a tool. It was a tool to communicate with my friends, to communicate with my coworkers, to make arrangements, to go out, do whatever we wanted. But it was a means to an end for what I wanted to do. And I don't think that that piece has changed. The tools that are available have changed, their advancement, their capabilities have shifted. But what I am using them for, the use case is still the same. I'm still trying to get something done, and technology is trying to help me. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if I double click into the idea of the capabilities have evolved, part of my perspective now as a more seasoned adult is really the fact that it's not just about the tools and how we use them. It is what they enable us to be able to do. We're capable of so much more. It's a magnifier or amplifier of our own knowledge, our own skills, our own desires at the end of the day. So I
Mm-hmm.
really view technology not just as a tool to execute tasks, but really to, in a way, create a life and manage a lifestyle and a career the way in which I need it to.
Mm-hmm. That
And
sounds
I hope
good.
other people start to think about it that way too, if they're not already there.
Yeah, I mean, and then, I see all these ads, like, again, I'm a lawyer, and I see all these ads where people or other lawyers have this great knowledge and use of technology, and they're telling us that the lawyers that are going to get behind are not going to be replaced because of AI itself. They're going to be replaced because they don't know how to use AI.
Yes. I
So I
feel
hear a lot of
like
that.
people are saying that across industries. And I get
Mm-hmm.
why people are saying it, but I think we need to be more specific about why that statement is likely true.
Okay.
Because on one hand, we're hearing that. On the other hand, we're hearing, hey, human intelligence is more important than ever. Human skills, uniquely human skills, are so critical now. But what do those things really mean? And I don't know that people spend enough time really breaking that down to say, what is a uniquely human skill that I should learn early in my career or mid career or even later in my career based on where we are right now that's going to help me stay employed, that is still going to be relevant in 5, 10, 15 years. Things like emotions, emotional intelligence. I can remember
Yes.
getting in my career, and I grew up the child who was always sensitive. I'm an introvert by nature, and it was like, oh, you're so sensitive. But what that has actually translated to in my adult life is I'm very attuned to other people's emotions and what's going on with me. My computer can't do that. Gemini can't do that for me. It can predict things, it can take data, but it can't necessarily read the room. I mean, to insert whatever tool you're using, read the room for like, here's the body language that's going on. And maybe we'll get there one day. But as of right now, the tools that are out in the environment and like the emotional intelligence of it all and how to translate that into your work. Think about calling a call center. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
in stress because I'm stranded, my flight's been canceled, and I need to speak to a human and be able to articulate, hey, here's what's going on and why I need you to solve this problem, get me home immediately, whether that's there's a family emergency, a medical issue has happened, whatever it may be. I'm not expecting the automated voice that, when you start punching the numbers, to be able to recognize, okay, she's having a medical emergency and needs to get in touch with someone. Unless there's some button that's been pre-coded that says, hit this button for medical emergency, hit this button for family emergency, and then it is able to route, that won't exist. I need a human who's able to process that information and help me problem solve and say, here's what we're going to do about it together. That's what that looks like.
And that's deep that you say, like, the emotional intelligence. I mean, because I hate to say it, some human beings are learning what their
Yes.
emotional intelligence, I guess IQ is, right?
Yes.
But anyway, I just had a flashback of some young person trying to tell me I didn't have emotional intelligence. I'm like, girl, you learn a new word and a new phrase.
Look,
Don't
I'm
try
glad
to use it on me.
we're on
Don't
this
try to use it
wellness
on me.
journey. We're all in therapy, learning the words and
We're
using
all in
it.
therapy, and my job is to be objective, not subjective. And the work I do, I can't put my feelings in it. I gotta approach it
Yes.
objectively. So speaking of which, when you're saying about that one human skill that we can, a career that we can ace or skill that we can use that we know AI currently doesn't have. Like, I think about critical thinking. Like, yeah, as a lawyer, we can use AI, but I treat AI as a legal assistant or a paralegal, right?
Yeah.
Like, I know the questions because I know the law. So I
Yeah.
know what questions to ask, and I know how to critically think about a problem. And there have been many times where AI will be like, oh, that's right. Oh my God, I think they're created to compliment us anyway. Oh my God, you're really like practicing law on a new level. Like, they would say things like that. But
Yes.
we are training them in the process. So we got to be real about it. We are training them, right? Is that true that we are training them?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
I can remember, so I have a 1-year-old, and I can remember while I was out on leave, everything changed in 2025 all of a sudden. And I can remember sitting there playing with my baby, and I was like, okay, if I don't pick up something, some kind of tool, and start somewhere, like somewhere in terms of teaching it about myself or about what I'm trying to do, by the time I get back to work, it's not going to know anything about me. I'm not going to know anything about the tools either. So it's this relationship in a way that has to exist where, and when I say relationship, it's almost like dating. Literally, I sat down and told my tool, hey, my name is Ashley. I have 2 children. Here are their names. Here are their ages. Here is my husband. And here's what I do for work. By the way, here's my LinkedIn link. Here is my resume. And just started so small of feeding it information, just like I was getting to know someone. And then by the time I got back to work, by the time I started to do more advanced things, it wasn't that I was starting from scratch and using a tool that didn't know anything about me, didn't know anything about what I needed to be doing. And that is part of what's scary for people, but also what's going to make the data and the information that it's using a lot better. So there's this balancing act of, again, just like any relationship, you have to decide very consciously, what am I going to tell the tool versus what do I want to keep for myself?
Yeah, and to your point, I was surprised to hear you say that you told your tool intentionally. You wanted your tool to know who you were and your family members. There are a lot of people that are just afraid about AI. Like, before ChatGPT or OpenAI, it's just like people are afraid of Alexa,
They are.
Siri, listening, eavesdropping, which there have been some lawsuits against, I guess, was
Yeah.
it A&T, not A&T, iPhone, I guess, because Siri was actually eavesdropping. And then when you go, like, on Facebook, all of a sudden something that you said, and I don't know
Is
if that's a
there.
connection, it's there, like an ad is there. So what would you say to people who are still, like, afraid of, I guess, dating or getting to know a tool? Because, I mean, the benefits of it will be that the tool will know you more, the tool will know your needs, the tool will know your career, the tool will adjust. to being your personal assistant, a real personal assistant that knows your wants, needs, and can maybe project, something that you're going to ask. So, what would you say to those people who are just, I guess, still scared of it?
I would say fear and skepticism is what keeps humans alive, number one. Like, if we think about evolution, like, yes, like this is a very human response. Like, there's
Yes,
no technology that we've ever introduced where people weren't scared of it. Like, if
that's
you
true.
really think about that, I'm sure someone was scared of fire when that first fire was lit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
what is that?
exactly.
And I think there's a piece of this where the emotional management behind it is recognizing, like, mentally, okay, I know I'm scared of this. What are my boundaries? What exactly am I scared of? And really doing that analysis yourself and then being able to say, and what do I need to do about it? Because in most of this, we have a choice. There is consent. I would encourage people always read through those pop-ups that are coming up. Always read through the fine print so you understand what you're consenting to. Because I think there's a version of what I just described as willingly choosing to add information to my tool to say, hey, I want you to know about me, versus there is so much data collection always happening around us that we actually have consented to. And maybe we either don't realize it or we're not paying attention to it. But the tools are learning us either way. And I think we then have to pay attention to what ways, even outside of me entering information into insert whatever tool of choice that you want to use, outside of me entering that information, where else is it collecting data? Where
Mhm.
else am I providing information about myself? Our choices on social media, that's also data we're putting out into the
Yeah,
environment. So I think there is a piece of this where it is like front of brain versus back of brain, where people, the things that are obvious, like telling my tool, hey, this is my husband, this is my family. Also, I want you to talk like a Jamaican woman because my family's Jamaican. That's what mine
yeah.
does.
Oh, that's cool.
Exactly. Like,
Okay.
you can tell it a lot of things, but there's back of brain where you're using things. You're using email platforms. You're using social media. I think about things like if you're using Netflix, if you're using Amazon, where do you think it's getting the information for those recommendations? Here's a product you may like. Here's a show you may like. It's learning you.
It is learning
So
you.
there's a piece of this where we want the benefits of a customized experience where I don't have to filter through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of shows on Netflix to find something I want. It brings it forward to me. It's like, based on you watching Grey's Anatomy, Ashley, here are some other shows I think you'll like. That
Yeah,
is the same
exactly.
thing. It is learning me, but we're not thinking about it in that way.
And I think I forgot to tell my listeners, like, I did introduce you, but I didn't tell them where you work. Am I at liberty to do that? Because I think that, I don't have to if you don't want me to. I don't have to, but
You
I
can.
just I just realized I did not do that.
It is
Because I just
public information.
Okay, if you Google Ashley Gatewood, you will see that she works for Google. And so just wanted to like just ground you as a definitely subject matter expert. Even outside of Google, it sounds like, you're a subject matter expert in this work. But yeah, just knowing that everyone uses Google because before there was open AI,
Yes.
people would Google stuff. Like, like first, in my profession, we were like, oh my God, that's a Google attorney. Like it's a client who went on Google and they were like, well, Google
Yes.
says I have a good case. Now
Yes.
people are going on Chat GPT. Well, Chat GPT says I have a good case, and it also told me that you should take it. That hasn't happened to me, but I've heard other people say that that's happened to them,
And here's the thing,
so
you have a choice in whether you take them or not.
exactly, exactly. And I'm telling y'all, if you come to me and say Chat GPT tell you to make me take your case, the likelihood of me taking it is very slim because I already foresee it's gonna be a difficult relationship and that
Yes.
person's gonna think they have a legal strategy and I don't, right? So
Here's the question for you. Do you
mhm.
think that we're seeing an uptick in people choosing to represent themselves because of the access to this information?
Yes, I've seen people, people are already like trying to represent themselves before. I mean, because unfortunately, in this nation and in North Carolina, there's not enough attorneys for every person that needs legal help. And there's a
Yes.
big access to justice issue as far as those who can actually afford a lawyer. So
Yep.
my background is at Legal Aid, so which is a nonprofit
Yes.
legal law firm. So I did help people on their end for free, but of course, a nonprofit paid me to do the work. And there were people that will try to represent themselves. Unfortunately, we saw recently in the headlines of a woman who did that, right, and was seeking justice. And the headlines are about how she shot two attorneys. And of course, there are two narratives, and people are trying to unpack the truth for themselves. So I'm not going to get deep into that part, but just to say that she herself, when I look at the pleadings, it looks to me as if she had some Chat GPT or some Claude help on
Yes.
like putting those pleadings together. But again, you gotta approach it with knowledge, right? You gotta approach it with
Yes.
knowledge. You gotta have a knowledge of the law, a
Mhm.
knowledge of what claims are recognizable under North Carolina law, under federal law, and you gotta have a knowledge of how to actually draft it. But I think we will definitely see more people doing that. I have a case where there's a defendant that has done that, and on one instance, it could be beneficial for people who can't find an attorney. I would still advise people, if you drafted something, you should get an attorney to review it. I mean, that will
Yeah.
reduce the cost if you were able to contribute to some of the work. But it's not something that the bar has really addressed. I'm talking about the North Carolina State Bar. We have addressed like our ethical responsibilities in using AI. We have to supervise it. My biggest fear about AI and using it is, what if it's hacked? So I do a good job of trying not to enter any personal identifiable information about my clients, because I don't care if you know me, but I mean, ethically, I don't want to be sharing confidential attorney information about my client and
Yeah.
open AI.
That's fair.
Even though I heard you could go back and say delete your memory. I don't know if I trust that.
I mean, I think this goes back to our original point about understanding what you're consenting to and what you're putting
Yes.
in there and making informed decisions. And I think a lot of people aren't making informed decisions about what they are and aren't doing with the tools right now.
Well, what mistakes, I guess, do you see early career professionals making? And you may have talked a little bit about it as they enter
Yes.
today's workforce. I know you said already have a particular skill, but are there any other mistakes you see early career professionals making?
Yes. Okay. So, first, I will start with there is a lack of understanding and awareness, or if you flip that, awareness and understanding of what tools it actually exist. And if you don't know what's out there, how are you possibly going to know what's at your disposal to use and leverage? For example, I was speaking with a group of young adult men who wanted to start a t-shirt business. And part of what I said to them was, okay, where's your business plan? Like, business plan? Like, you didn't put this, I'm like, you didn't even search this? Like, come on. Let's think through. Like, you could simply ask the prompt if you were in one of these tools and say, what do I need to do to start a t-shirt business? And it will likely give you some version of, hey, and somewhere in there you probably need a business plan, because you're going to need some investors, or you're going to need some mentors who are willing to put in time to help coach you through this. But all that say, you need to be able to explain what is your vision for the business and what is your plan to get it launched. But in the absence of not knowing those tools are there, they're literally just coming up with things off the top of their head. And I was like, but that's not the information I need as an expert or a potential investor. So go in the tool, ask it the questions that you have, because you're asking me the questions. But as someone who is more seasoned in their career, I need you to be coming to me with those answers. So I think
Yeah.
that's a piece of that, of the awareness and understanding of what tools and how they can help you. And then I think there's the second piece of, I am still surprised at how people are taking outputs from the tools as gospel,
Yes.
not reviewing, they're not, to your point, they're not using the critical thinking. They don't, unfortunately, early in your career, you don't have expertise sometimes to question or correct the output of what you're getting, but you have to have wisdom to know that your first or second draft is not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And say, okay, what do I now need to do in order to make this better? This is my starting point. This can't be what I take to my manager, my leader. This can't be what I use to launch my business. This is to help me along in the journey and get there faster, but it's not the final answer. So I think people are still, unfortunately, early in their careers and honestly throughout their careers are making this mistake of taking the shortcut and then not taking the baton and finishing the race.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think too, like, it's AI. Can you hear, people saying it's going to dumb us down? Like, are we going to be dumbed down by AI? Maybe not the people who worked, existed, and went to school before OpenAI or these other tools came
Yeah.
into existence. But I just worry about the new generation. I do know that my kids who are in high school and middle school, I know that they don't necessarily use AI, but I did catch my 12-year-old asking Alexa a math question. And I'm just like, and then I know, I know Google has been used by one of my kids to check their homework. And I'm just like, I guess it's okay if you're checking your homework, but
Yeah.
you better not be doing your homework,
Yeah.
using,
And I
yeah.
think that's the key. This is where the relationship that each generation has with technology and understanding it is really
Mm-hmm,
important. I know you mentioned you're in Gen X, I'm a millennial.
mm-hmm,
And I know plenty of people in other generations that are figuring this out before us and younger than us. And the piece I would say is having been, the millennials are kind of the sandwich generation.
mm-hmm.
We remember dial up. We remember AOL chat rooms.
I
We
do
remember
too. Yeah.
like getting the iPhones. We remember the launch of Facebook. But so we know a world without all of this technology.
Yes.
But there's also a version where Gen X and older, they didn't have this technology. So that also means they didn't know how to parent with technology.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be such a challenge because if you don't understand the technology, how do you understand how to set boundaries and how to still encourage critical thinking and also understand the impacts of usage, the amount of time children should be on devices, things of that nature? So, to give you a tangible example, I like that you brought up your children using some of the technology. I've actually been working with my son to try and teach him, he doesn't know it yet, but what is prompt engineering? So, for example, for his birthday is coming up later in the year, and we wanted him to do research into taking a trip instead of having a party.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what he kept asking our device was essentially questions that didn't quite make sense. For example, he was like, what time is a good time to fly to Chicago? And the device said, well, I think that 8:58 a.m. would be a good time to fly to Chicago from North
Mm-hmm.
Carolina because you're going to land. It's not going to be rush hour. It's not going to be too busy. You will have already eaten breakfast. And he's like, that's not what I wanted to know. What he actually wanted to know is what time of year is a good time to go to Chicago?
Yeah, you gotta be specific,
Yes,
right?
you brought up questions earlier. Learning
Uh-huh.
how to ask the right questions
Mm-hmm.
is an early version of one, it's basic communication skills. So you need to do that with humans as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then two, if you can't do that with humans, how are you going to be able to do that effectively with a tool? Because as a human, I'm going to go back and forth with you a little bit to get to the bottom of what you're trying to do or trying to understand. But the tool is just going to keep giving you answers and you might get frustrated with that. But if you don't know how to ask a specific, clear question, you're not going to get the output that you need. And that, as a millennial parent who works in tech, is my job to now teach my child early enough. I can see it. I know I need to teach you how to ask the right question. So when you're in these technologies, you know how to ask the right question too.
See, and that's amazing. So, and that was kind of like part of another question I was going to ask you, just like, which is building upon people being skilled to enter the workplace, even for jobs that don't even exist now. So it sounds like AI prompting is really going to be needed. But it also still sounds like there's going to be some type of foundational learning that needs to happen. Like, just in my profession, a lot of young attorneys, in season attorneys, we do depend a lot on the generation before us because they've written treatises, these
Yes.
books, these subject matter books. They teach continuing legal education courses like on employment law or whatever it is. So I always go there first, but I also realize that our legal research tools like Lexis and Westlaw, to be competitive, they all have now inserted an AI tool. My case management system that I use is now saying, "Oh, we have AI." My drafting software is saying, "Oh, we have AI." So like it's like all these like research tools that were that evolved because you're talking about age and what we remember in law school. I remember we
Yes.
learned how to research by using the big books on the shelf and
Yes.
indexed it, and then that evolved to Westlaw, Lexis, which is on the computer, like a
Like
software.
LexisNexis.
LexisNexis and
Yes.
Westlaw, and now it's just like LexisNexis with AI, and so
Yes.
it's continuing to evolve. And to your point about the younger generation, like I remember, Steve, I always like to tell people like, yeah, the Gen X, we're older, we might be great aunties because I hear the millennials, I hear y'all calling yourselves aunties and unks now. Like y'all are not auntie and unks, we're auntie and unks. Cause I'm
Let
sure
us
ain't nobody
live.
grandma yet. Yeah, I'm like nobody grandma yet. So I'm not ready to be
No.
called that. I'm not ready to be called Nana. So
No.
cause in real life, I'm not, believe it or not. I know a lot of Gen X's or grandparents, but
Right.
I'm not. I started late. So I have a 12 and a 15-year-old. But I will say that when you talk about it, and I'm just thinking back to Steve Jobs, he was a Gen X. So I remember whenever he will unveil Apple. So we were the ones that kind of like really started creating the
Yes.
technology. When he unveiled Apple and the way he did it, I mean, everyone would just wait for Steve Jobs to walk on the stage with his black t-shirt on and his blue
Yes.
jeans and talk about the updated Apple. And before
Yes.
the iPhone, it was the Blackberries. I remember that. I
Yes. I
remember the flip
remember.
phone.
Yes. I remember having my pink BlackBerry. Oh my gosh, I love that
Yes.
thing.
Trying to text on that was hard. They got text
Yes. Remember
messaging. It
it's
was
like the
just,
Nokia phone with Snake.
yeah, it's a Nokia phone. Like you said, the dial up to internet. I remember at NC State when internet looked like it was still a military tool
Yes.
because it was like green
Yes.
and black. Like, what is this?
Yes.
So it's so just also seeing how it has evolved over my life. How should people think about working in multi-generational, I guess, workforce spaces? My
Mhm.
experience has been that the boomers, there was this guy at my previous law firm, he loved a dictation machine. And I said, well, you can dictate using an iPad. You don't have to have the big dinosaur dictation machine. You could do that. I mean, it was like hard because the older you get, it is harder, I'm learning, to
Yes.
understand technology or learn it as fast as a generation like the alphas and the Gen Z, where it's intuitive to them.
Yeah.
So, how should people think about working in a multi generational workforce as technology evolves?
Well, for starters, some of that is understanding the perspective of each generation. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it will really largely depend on what you do for your job and why you need to understand them. So for example, like you're saying, having someone who uses a dictation machine, there's no reason for anyone that I work with to use that. To your point, we are inherently in the technology all day, every day. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that I don't work in a multi-generational workforce. So as new tools or features are rolled out, how we receive them, how we adapt to them, it just even in simple ways, how I talk to you about the technology will differ based on each generation and
Mm-hmm.
based on demographics as well.
Mm-hmm.
How I talk to someone about, hey, what a really cool feature that I remember coming back to work to was now there's makeup in all of the like video chat features. And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's
I don't have to
amazing.
put on makeup every day. And then I had to like play with it and test it out. No one told me about it, but I stumbled upon it myself. How you roll out a feature like that is going to be very different across the generations and again, across the demographics. I may not, as a male, want to use this. Maybe I do. Maybe there's features I'm not aware of that would benefit me even as a man, whatever that may look like. But I think the piece that people aren't doing is pausing and seeing things from other people's perspective. And I can remember early in my career when I started in consulting, doing a lot of research around even the relationship between technology and the generations, like whether people are optimistic about it, skeptical about it. It really has to do with the experience that they had, especially in their childhood and young adulthood related to technology. Even things like our generation that experienced the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah, let's
where
talk about that.
okay, I love talking about that. And why I love talking about it is because I think that it is important for us to look at history to understand how to handle this moment in time. I think it is also important to look at history to understand the trends that will exist. So, for example, I've been doing research on this myself. And a lot of people, of course, are inherently concerned that AI is going to eliminate jobs, like we've said. But when you look at every single version of the Industrial Revolution, because sometimes we think about the big one, like automation in factories, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But there
Mm-hmm.
have been multiple industrial revolutions, and this is
Mm-hmm.
just one of them. And when I think about those and look at the data, typically what happens from a trend perspective is there are about 20 to 30% of roles that are eliminated. And then 60 to 70% of roles are typically they change or they're transformed, as we would say in the industry, but they still exist. And then there are net new jobs that are created. And whenever I look at any technology change that's coming about, I really try and look at it from that lens that it's not just the eliminations that are going to happen. Now, there is a world in which that eliminations bucket could be larger this time. I can't speak to that. I can't predict what's going to happen. I do think that there is a lot that is very different and much faster, much bigger at scale related to AI than other versions of industrial revolutions. But those three buckets will still be true. A good example is when I think about new jobs being created, a lot of people are worried about the environmental impact of AI and data centers. And I was speaking at a university recently and I got a very pointed question about, well, what are you doing about the impact? And part of my response was one, I think it is great that people are so passionate about the community impact. We should be, because that's part of what creates responsibility and accountability for everyone involved in this, the companies, the policymakers, the community itself, in speaking up and advocating for itself too.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing, I think, in that conversation with that student that I would want to bring forward here is the fact that you can be passionate about it, especially these younger generations, and point out that there's an issue. But what are you willing to do about it? Are
Yeah.
you going to take on a job that investigates the societal and community impact? Are you going to be environmentalist? What are you willing to do personally and professionally to actually help solve the problem, not just point it out?
Mm-hmm.
We're all really great at pointing out problems.
Yeah, we
And
are, because that's easy, right? That's
it's
easy to
easy.
complain. Like to your point, the data centers, a lot of communities are concerned about data centers and the consumption of, I guess, resources and energy bills. But everyone uses AI now. So I mean, so I think people are like, well, I don't want to get rid of AI. I just don't want it in my backyard. So just broadly speaking, get in an industry or a career where you figure out how to have a balanced approach to it, because it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's
Just
going to
because
continue
we
to evolve.
Yes, just because we need to be accountable and mindful doesn't mean we get rid of it. And some people can choose to live without the technology, the homesteaders, whoever. Like if you choose to live without technology, I think that is a perfectly acceptable choice for yourself. But
Yeah.
there is a majority of the world that will continue to live with this technology. And I agree with you. We have to have a subset of our community that is willing to stand up and do something about it, not just shine a light on it, but actually take action and devote their own lives and their careers. For myself, like being on the inside of a tech company, part of the reason I am now very passionate about this is because someone has to have a seat at the table.
Yes. And that's in anything, right? You
Great.
gotta, if you want to
I'm
change the
all fine.
problem, bring your chair if they don't give you a seat, but you gotta have a seat at the table so there could be various perspectives, right? That's
Exactly.
there. So yeah, so we were talking about opportunities. We started talking about concerns. I guess another concern is that people are concerned about their civil liberties surrounding AI surveillance. And I've seen people going in stores, and it could be happening now at Walmart, wherever, where your face is being recognized or something like that. So I know that's a concern that I would like to hear your opinion on. And also, what about situations where biases show up in AI systems? Like I was trying to, I'm a Gen X, but I try to, be on the cutting edge. It may be a little cringy sometimes when I use certain words amongst my alpha generation kids, but I did try to make a music video out of AI, right? And
Okay.
I was just like, yeah, I want a beautiful woman, blah, 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 blah. I want to, because my husband has a song called Beautiful Lady. He's an indie artist. And so, I'm looking for an image, and like the image looked nothing like me. So I'm just like, Dad, am I? And I mean, complexion, I mean,
Yes.
race, I mean, all of that. So it was just like, why did AI, when I say beautiful lady, why they went to a white woman? Why they created a white woman? And then when
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm talking about black woman, why they created a light skinned woman? So what is the bias? So I know humans teach it. So it's easy to see that some of those biases are coming from the parents of the
Mhm.
AI. But
Mm.
just wanted to hear your thoughts about that.
Okay, let's back into that. So I'm going to start where you ended. I First of all, yes, we there are the parents of the technology, so to speak, but AI does not create bias out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. The bias in any tool is a direct reflection of the humans and the data that's out there. Because I think there's a piece of like, okay, they're creating the algorithm, but the data sources that already exist out there that they're being trained on have bias in them. Society has bias in it. Policies have bias in it. The entire system has bias in it worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And those
Mm-hmm.
pieces that I think when we get an output like an image that we thought, okay, I asked for a beautiful woman and it showed me a white woman, the bias is towards showing you a white woman. So it is showing you exactly what is out on the internet, what people are thinking, what they're saying. So there's a version of even us, like we go back to the learning piece and what we're putting out there. A lot of times, if we are not adding positive data to the system, how is it going to learn how to reflect and show us a version of beauty when we haven't taken the time or taken the seat at the table to do it? So
Mm-hmm.
there's an ownership piece for us as well too around that. Yes, in the collective society external to tech companies, but then also yes, in working towards having a seat at the table in tech, in policy, in healthcare, you name it, industry, because we need a seat everywhere in order to address the systemic bias that the tool is pulling on. The tool is a mirror at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
And
And
that's
that's the piece
good.
we like.
Yeah, it's a mirror of society, like you're saying. So I guess a little bit what I was saying that the parents who created bias in society, maybe we have our own biases, biases as well. Like you said, the data is out there, it's already biased. I remember recently I actually created a workbook because I do wills, estates, and trusts, and I created a workbook called Every Wise Woman is Clothed in Legacy. And I know I wanted to center Black women on the cover, and
Mhm.
so I had to work for a moment, but was worth it to say I want a Black woman with perm hair. I want a center Black woman with locks, or I want a Black woman that's elderly. Now I want a white woman, because that's my largest client base are women when it comes to estate planning. I want a white woman. I want to be elderly, and I want a Black woman. I want to be like just like having to
Yes.
teach it diversity and inclusion, right? Having to
Yes.
teach it like I want my book, cover to be diverse, and these are the images and these are the hues. So am
So
I teaching AI, and will that and next time my tool does something for me, it will already know, like, well, Yolanda's going to want this because I feel like they want to please you, right? So I feel
Yes.
like,
So that's what I was thinking as you were saying. It was like you're teaching it what you want.
yeah,
And it may take a couple of times. And I would encourage you to even be more explicit of like, I value diversity. Anytime I'm asking for an image, make sure you're being inclusive and diverse. I think there's a piece of this too. As you've been talking, you've been getting more precise, even in your communication to me about what you wanted.
yes,
You saying,
yes.
I want an image of a beautiful woman. I mean, bias is the default.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to combat that, I have to be precise in what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Precision is the combating factor of bias.
And you just taught me how to do prompting by saying, just go ahead and let it know from the bat, I
Yeah.
want this, so whenever you're creating an image for me, these are my values, and this is what I want to see. So that's amazing. But the other concern, is the data centers and communities. Like we talked about solutions. Like
Mhm.
what can be a solution that a community, or I should say, I think communities just hear the concerns, but what are some of the benefits of having a data center in a community?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is job creation. In fact, I was on LinkedIn the other day and I saw a peer that I formerly worked at a company with was posting about their company hiring at a new data center. And what I really liked about the post was that it wasn't just, oh, we're hiring. It was
Mm-hmm.
precise again about here are the exact types of roles that we're hiring for. Here are the skill sets for these roles. We are bringing recruiters and leaders that are actually making hires. This isn't a networking event. This is direct sourcing of people that we need to hire right now. And having that clarity around here is the opportunity that we're creating. Yes, there is impact, but we also need to do job creation. We also need to do mitigation of some of the adverse effects. And
Mm-hmm.
in that process, for example, if we know we need to clean the air and we need to put new filters into a school environment, that school now has new filters.
Yes.
That's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah.
And I think there are some very tactical things that sometimes people don't see. Like, none of our students are walking around thinking about the filters in their school. For the most
Mm-hmm.
part, some of them may be very woke and be concerned about it. But your average student is not worried about their air quality and the filter until they have an impact from it. And
Yes.
sometimes the benefits that we experience, we don't even know that they're there. So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a piece of this where ask the questions, ask how things are being mitigated so that people can help educate you on what is already being done and you have visibility into understanding what else should you be advocating for. There are
Mm-hmm.
almost always, at least in my experience, there's almost always some kind of community advocate or some kind of community organization or legal group that is closely associated with a new data center being stood up. Find out who that is, find out what organization that is. Again, ask the questions and figure out what needs to be advocated for. But I think there are versions of this even outside of just creating jobs where people should be looking for those benefits. Like you're saying, it's not all bad. Is it real? Absolutely. I think the other piece I would ground people in is that, especially being in technology for a long time, I think people forget that things like servers, for example, we can see a data center because they're so large. But previous versions of technology, those servers were located on site at places, at
Mm-hmm.
a company.
Mm-hmm.
You have those physical servers sitting right there. And so the impact has always existed environmentally on people, on communities. And I think what's part of what's shifting is that just like everything related to AI, it's much more visible. There was no one at the beginning of my career asking me, well, how's that server in the basement going to impact me?
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't see it, except for
And
the
that's
people who
it.
were actually working on it.
And those people were impacted by. I remember the server room in my law office will overheat. So
Yes,
there were like you said, there were issues there too.
yes.
So I like the fact that you're saying that, when these data centers, one, oppose it, but if that's your choice, but then what's the and or game? You always should have a plan B. If
Yeah,
this data center is built, just like any development, I do a lot of housing work. What are the community benefits agreements that we could put in
yes,
place with this company that will then produce, we hear the jobs, but like you say, produce these other things that will mitigate our environmental concerns.
exactly.
So that sounds good. And I know you and I, we were talking briefly before the show about Deborah Ross, who's a congresswoman here in North Carolina. She recently introduced a bill called the Protect Working Musicians Act of 2026. And when I heard her talk about it, my ears perked up because my husband's an independent artist. But she was just talking about how this bill will allow independent musicians and small music creators to collectively negotiate with streaming platforms and AI companies regarding compensation for the use of their music. And I didn't know until recently that there was AI music. My kids told me it was AI music. I didn't believe them. I'm like, AI is making music now? But
Yeah,
apparently it sounds like a real person saying it, but it's AI. So the bill is designed to address concerns that AI developers are using these artists' work to train models without consent or fair compensation. So to your point, what can independent, we talked about this before the show, what can independent artists do to ensure that maybe they're leveraging this and walking out in front of this concern and saying, hey, if you want to make AI music, we probably can't stop you because that's the evolution, but maybe we can get paid if we make music and sell it to AI companies. So instead of them just snatching it without our permission, we could create maybe a market to sell music. Is that
yeah.
is that a great rephrasing of what you said? I'm trying
I
to remember.
absolutely think so.
Mhm.
And I like to go back to the history of it all. And like when you think about cassette tapes moving on to CDs moving on to what were they? The small things, the
Um,
icons.
MP3 players.
Yes, the
Oh,
MP3,
MP3
the
players.
MP3 players. Exactly. And then we've moved into streaming,
Yes.
right? Of the music. Like there's a version of this where the evolution of where your music is and how it's distributed is not new. What is new is one, the access that people have to your music. I mean, remember Napster and everyone was
Yeah,
melting
I
down
remember
about
Napster.
the
Yes.
exactly. That was also sucking income out of the artists. And everyone was figuring out, trying to understand how do we control this? The policy has to catch up to the technology. So that's one point. And then two, to your point about the artist and staying ahead of the opportunity, this is where actually lifting your head up and being a business person about your music. And yes, looking forward towards what are the creative opportunities is going to be really important because at the end of the day, when I think about the Taylor Swifts, the Beyoncés, like they are also innovators in how they were putting their music out as well too. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
resist streaming. They leaned into it. So there's a version of this when I look ahead to, all right, if you see that people are taking your music and creating new versions of it with AI, the question I have is why aren't you doing it? Why
Mm-hmm.
aren't you doing it for yourself?
Yeah, and what you're sharing is kind of like, and I'm gonna have to land this plane, like which I hate to do, but I always say that, um, because this is a great conversation. Like what you're saying, what you're leaning into when you think about, because this is all rights reserved. I always have to end it with like civil rights and our rights. When you think about civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, and John Lewis, like how will they approach technology today? What will be their concerns? Like I think Dr. King will focus on the opportunities that AI can provide because he was all about finding the avenues for more opportunity for us in our community. And he will probably be concerned about is it going to create a gap in wealth and power and how to close that gap. I think
Yeah.
Ella Baker will ask who owns the technology and whether communities have a voice in how it is used. And so you're talking about the policy and creating the policy and how can we own the technology. I think Michael Mass, I think he would be concerned about surveillance and facial recognition
Yes, for
and
sure.
government monitoring because he experienced those things. So But Fannie Lou Hammer will probably be asking about whether working people and rural communities are actually benefiting. So those are questions out there, not for us to just point and complain and stay in a corner of fear, because this train is coming. We can't stop it. It's evolving. We got to get ahead of it, and we got to be the solution solvers. I think John Lewis would be concerned about misinformation. There is a lot of
There
misinformation
is.
on social media. So I just think that that's why people, we can't just take our brain out of our heads when we're using AI. We got to continue to think independently and do our research and double down and not just trust someone because they, got something wrong on AI and then they posted it, and it's misinformation. But as we enter and continue to enter this AI era, um, I want to ask you, is there a book you think everyone should read?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, I know you asked me about a book, and I'm going to answer that, but something you just said really spoke to me. And I was thinking about all of these people, these great people that you just mentioned. And I think sometimes we lose the plot on the fact that part of our community organizing, especially back then, was about the distribution of information, like you're saying. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I think about the channels that those activists use, like newspapers, radio stations, churches, and the tools that are at our disposal today to do that faster, to
Yes.
magnify that messaging. And while, yes, they can be really scary, think about the impact we can have. I mean, think about if those individuals had the ability to create content so quickly in a minute's time of, okay, MLK, I have a dream, and he wants to put it on like a slick sheet and send it out on Instagram. Or like, how do you take nuggets from that and edit the content and get it out there so
Mhm.
not just people in the United States, but people across the world can see it? How about translating it into multiple languages so they can understand the I Have a Dream speech in their own language, real time? Think about the meta glasses where it can real time translate as well too. You could be standing at the I Have a Dream speech, watching MLK and hearing it translated real time. Like, that technology is still so powerful. And if we can figure out ways to harness it for community activism, don't let it happen to us. We have to take a driver's seat in this in deciding what it means for our community. So I just like you, I have goosebumps. You got me so excited about it.
Well, I'm glad I gave you goosebumps, girl. I got goosebumps just hearing you like land this plane for me. I think I really
Yes.
don't have anything else to say. I think you did it so eloquently.
You asked me
I
about a
really
book though. You asked
Okay,
me about a
yes.
book. I want to make sure I answer that. I would say The Coming Wave by Mustafa Sulaiman would be good.
Okay.
Explore society, workforce, and geopolitical implications of AI.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to get that book. Listeners,
Yeah.
I hope you get that book too. I want to thank Ashley Gatewood for being on our show this morning. Y'all probably didn't even need coffee to lean into this conversation because it's been good. So, I mean, today's conversations just reminds us that, technology is just never just about technology. It's about us. It's about, I mean, we are the most creative technology or are human, we call ourselves humans. I'm looking for the right word. We are still the best creation, I guess, that's here on the planet Earth. So it's about how we harness it, how we use it, and how we make it work for us. I mean, and even though these innovations become about power, I mean, we still have the power. We can still control it, and we can still profit from it. And I mean, she did an excellent closing for me, so I'm not going to say anything more. But I just want to thank you again, Ashley, for being on the show. And I want to thank you, listeners. Don't go anywhere. Say plug here to 92.1 FM, the choice station, the people's choice station. See you next time.
All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.